I stood frozen behind the kitchen door, holding a tray of appetizers. Listening to my younger brother Tommy explain to his girlfriend why I'd never be a problem for their future plans. "Maya's basically our live-in nanny," he said. His voice carrying the casual confidence of someone who'd never questioned their privilege. "She's been taking care of us since Mom and Dad died. So she doesn't really have her own life to worry about. When we move to California after graduation, she'll probably just stay in the house and keep everything running until we're ready to settle down." His girlfriend Amber giggled. "That's so convenient. Like having a built-in housekeeper who works for free." "Exactly. And the best part is, she actually thinks she's helping us become independent. She has no idea we've already got jobs lined up in San Francisco, or that we've been saving money for 2 years. Maya's so busy playing mother that she never asks the hard questions." Through the crack in the door, I could see our family's graduation party in full swing. 30 people celebrating Tommy's college graduation and our youngest sister Zoe's high school graduation. Everyone toasting their bright futures while I stood in the kitchen. Invisible as always, holding appetizers I'd spent 3 hours preparing. The cherry on top came when Zoe appeared next to Tommy. Fresh from accepting congratulations for her full scholarship to Northwestern University. A scholarship I'd known nothing about until this moment. "Did you tell her about Maya yet?" Zoe asked, glancing toward the kitchen. "Tell her what?" Amber looked curious. "That we're planning to sell the house after we're all settled in our new lives. Maya thinks she's going to inherit it or something. But Dad's will actually left it to all 4 of us equally. We can outvote her 3-1 whenever we want." My hands tightened on the serving tray. But my expression remained perfectly calm. Years of managing family crises had taught me to hide my reactions until I could process them privately. "What about your sister who's in college?" Amber asked. "Isabella? She's already planning to transfer to UCLA next semester. She's just been waiting for the right time to tell Maya." Tommy lowered his voice conspiratorially. "The thing is, Maya's never really had her own dreams. She dropped out of college when our parents died to take care of us, and now she's basically just stuck. It's actually kind of sad. But also convenient." I set the tray down silently on the kitchen counter and walked to the back door. My movements were controlled, deliberate. Nothing about my body language suggested that I'd just heard my siblings casually discussing how they'd been lying to me for years while planning to abandon me once they no longer needed my services. As I stepped onto the back porch, I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app. Sometimes the most important evidence comes from the moments when people think nobody's listening. But I had been listening. 4 months, actually. While my siblings thought I was just their devoted caretaker, I'd been quietly documenting every lie, every hidden college application. Every secret bank account funded by the Social Security survivor benefits they thought I didn't know about. Benefits that legally belonged to all of us. But that they'd been collecting and hiding since turning 18. The graduation party continued inside, full of laughter and plans for futures that didn't include me. I walked to my car, still holding my phone, and started the engine. "Well," I said to my reflection in the rearview mirror. "I guess it's time to give them exactly what they want. Independence." As I drove away from the house where I'd sacrificed 6 years of my life raising my siblings, I felt something I hadn't experienced since our parents died, complete clarity about my own future. My siblings had made one critical error in their planning. They'd assumed I was staying because I had nowhere else to go. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The Hampton Inn on the outskirts of town became my temporary headquarters. I'd checked in under my maiden name, something I'd never thought I'd need to use again, but which now felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd lost along the way. Sitting on the generic hotel bed, I opened my laptop and reviewed the folder I'd been building for 3 months. Ever since I'd first suspected my siblings were planning something they weren't sharing with me. The red flags had started in February when Isabella mentioned needing money for textbooks, then 3 days later posted Instagram photos from an expensive ski trip. When I asked about it, she claimed a friend had paid for everything. But the location tags showed her at a resort that cost more per night than most people made in a week. Then Tommy started working late shifts at his campus job, supposedly to save money for graduation expenses. But his pay stubs, which I found while doing laundry, showed he'd actually been working fewer hours than he claimed. The math didn't add up unless he had income from another source. The final piece fell into place when I found Zoe's acceptance letter to Northwestern hidden in her textbook. Full scholarship, room and board included, starting in the fall. The same scholarship she'd apparently received 4 months ago and never mentioned. That's when I started documenting everything. I opened my laptop and pulled up the spreadsheet I'd been maintaining. Column A, date. Column B, sibling. Column C, lie told. Column D, evidence. Column E, financial impact. The financial impact column was the most interesting. Over 6 years, I'd contributed approximately $180,000 of my own money to household expenses, emergency costs, and what I thought were shared family investments. Money I'd earned working 3 part-time jobs while taking care of my siblings full-time. Money that had allowed them to save their survivor benefits, work-study earnings, and scholarship funds for their secret escape plans. But the most damaging evidence was in the folder marked legal documents. 3 months ago, I'd hired a private investigator to look into some inconsistencies I'd noticed in our family's financial situation. What he'd found was enlightening. My siblings had been collecting survivor benefits that should have been distributed equally among all 4 of us. Instead, they'd used my social security number to claim I was still a dependent, which qualified them for higher benefit amounts while technically making me ineligible to claim my own share. Social security fraud. That's what it was called when someone deliberately misrepresented their situation to collect benefits they weren't entitled to. My phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. Maya? Where are you? People are asking about the main course. I smiled and typed back, emergency at work. You'll have to handle dinner. There's leftover pizza in the freezer. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, what emergency? You work at a bookstore. Book emergency, I replied. Very serious. Might be late. I turned off my phone and opened the second folder on my laptop, New Life Planning. 6 months ago, I'd started preparing for the possibility that my siblings would eventually want to live their own lives without me. What I hadn't expected was that they'd lie to me about it while continuing to use me as their personal support system. But their dishonesty had actually made my planning easier. While they were busy deceiving me, I'd been busy building a life they knew nothing about. The online degree I'd been completing in secret. I'd graduated 3 weeks ago with a bachelor's in business administration, magna cum laude. The remote work I'd been doing during my lunch breaks at the bookstore. I'd been promoted to full-time status with a salary that was triple what my siblings thought I was making. The apartment I'd been looking at in the city. I'd signed the lease yesterday and would be moving in next weekend. The job interview I'd supposedly missed for family obligations last month. I'd actually attended via video call and been offered the position. Regional manager for a national bookstore chain, starting salary $75,000, full benefits, travel opportunities. I'd been planning to tell my siblings about these changes gradually, to help them adjust to having less of my time and attention. I'd imagined family meetings where we discussed transitioning to a more independent dynamic while maintaining our close relationships. But after tonight's revelation, I realized I'd been planning for a family that didn't actually exist. My siblings didn't want a gradual transition to independence. They wanted me to remain their convenient caretaker until they were ready to discard me entirely. So instead of the gradual transition I'd originally planned, they were going to get an immediate one. I opened a new document and started typing a letter. 4 letters, actually. 1 for each of my siblings. By the time I finished writing, it was nearly midnight. Through the hotel window, I could see the lights of the city where I'd be starting my new life. A life my siblings didn't know existed, in a place they'd never thought to look for me. Tomorrow, I would deliver their letters and begin the most elegant disappearing act they'd ever seen. But tonight, I was going to get the first good night's sleep I'd had in 6 years. I returned to the house at 7 a.m. 2 hours before anyone else usually woke up. The graduation party decorations were still scattered across the living room. And the kitchen was exactly as I'd left it, dirty dishes piled in the sink, leftover food covering the counters. They hadn't even tried to clean up after themselves. I moved through the house methodically, collecting my personal belongings and leaving behind anything that belonged to the family. My clothes, my books, my laptop. My certificates from college courses they'd never known I was taking. Everything else stayed. The letters I placed on the kitchen counter. Each one sealed in an envelope with a sibling's name written in my careful handwriting. Tommy's letter was the longest. As the oldest after me. He'd been my partner in managing family logistics for years. He deserved a thorough explanation of what would happen now that his partner was retiring from the position. Isabella's letter was more clinical. She'd always been the most manipulative of my siblings. So I'd included photocopies of the financial documents that proved her involvement in the benefits fraud scheme. Zoe's letter was the shortest but probably the most devastating. She was 18 now, legally an adult, but she'd been protected from most of the family's financial realities. She was about to get a very quick education in independence. The fourth letter was addressed to all of them collectively. It contained the legal documents they'd need to understand their new situation. As of Monday morning, I would no longer be financially responsible for the house, utilities, groceries, insurance, or any other family expenses. The Social Security benefits that had been fraudulently collected in my name would be reported to the appropriate authorities for investigation. More importantly, the life insurance money that our parents had left, money my siblings assumed would remain in the family account indefinitely, had been legally redistributed according to the original will's intentions. While they'd been planning their secret departures and calculating how to outvote me on selling the house, I'd been working with a probate attorney to ensure that all inheritances were properly distributed to their rightful beneficiaries. The house belonged to all 4 of us equally, just as Zoe had told Amber. But the mortgage, utilities, property taxes, and maintenance costs also belonged to all 4 of us equally. They could keep the house if they wanted it. They'd just have to figure out how to pay for it themselves. I loaded the last box into my car and took one final look at the house where I'd spent 6 years trying to hold a family together. The morning light streaming through the kitchen windows illuminated the mess they'd left for me to clean up after their celebration. For once, I was leaving it for them to handle. My phone buzzed with a text from my new employer. Maya, excited to have you start Monday. Your office is ready and the team is looking forward to meeting you. I smiled and typed back, looking forward to it. See you Monday morning. As I drove away from the subdivision where I'd built a life around other people's needs, I felt something I'd almost forgotten existed, excitement about my own future. Behind me, the house grew smaller in my rearview mirror. In a few hours, my siblings would wake up and discover that their reliable caretaker had transformed overnight into someone they'd never imagined she could be. Someone with her own life, her own plans, and her own power to make choices. The best part was that everything I'd done was completely legal and morally justified. I hadn't stolen anything, destroyed anything, or hurt anyone. I'd simply stopped allowing myself to be taken advantage of. Sometimes the most devastating revenge is just refusing to participate in your own exploitation. My siblings wanted independence. They were about to get more of it than they'd ever bargained for. 3 hours later, my phone started ringing. I was sitting in my new apartment, signing paperwork with the utility companies, when Tommy's contact photo appeared on my screen. I let it go to voicemail. 20 minutes later, Isabella calling. Voicemail. Another 15 minutes, Zoe. Voicemail. Then Tommy again. Then Isabella. Then all 3 of them calling one after another in a frantic pattern that told me they'd found the letters. I finished setting up my electricity account and played the voicemails. Tommy's first message was confused but still entitled, "Maya, what the hell is this letter supposed to mean? You can't just leave us notes and disappear. We need to talk about this like adults. Call me back." His second message, 20 minutes later, was angrier, "Maya. This is ridiculous. Whatever you think we did wrong, we can discuss it. But you can't just abandon your responsibilities to the family. That's not how this works." His third message revealed that he'd started understanding the financial implications. "Maya, I talked to the bank about the mortgage. They said you removed yourself as a guarantor. That doesn't make sense. You need to fix this immediately." Isabella's messages were more strategic. She'd always been the planner among my siblings. "Maya, I read your letter and I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. You're right that we should have communicated better about our future plans, but this seems like an extreme reaction. Let's meet for coffee and work this out." Her second message showed she'd been doing math. "Maya, I need you to explain this insurance money situation. According to your letter, you took your share of the inheritance, but that money was supposed to stay in the family account for emergencies. We need that money to maintain the house." Her third message was pure panic. "Maya, please call me back. I don't understand how you did all this legal stuff without telling us. We're going to lose the house if you don't help us figure out the finances." Zoe's messages broke my heart a little, but not enough to change my mind. "Maya, I'm really confused. Your letter talks about Social Security fraud and legal investigations, but I don't understand what any of that means. Can you please come home and explain this in person? I'm scared. Maya, Tommy, and Isabella are fighting about money and they won't tell me what's happening. Tommy keeps yelling about mortgage payments and Isabella is on the phone with someone about legal problems. Please come back. I need you to fix this. Maya, where are you? Nobody will answer my questions and everyone's acting crazy. This isn't funny anymore. I need my sister." I set down my phone and looked around my new apartment. It was smaller than the family house, but it was mine. The lease was in my name only. The utility bills would come to my address only. The decisions about furniture, decorating, and daily routines would be mine only. For the first time in 6 years, I was living in a space where I wasn't responsible for anyone's needs but my own. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize with a local area code. Hello? Maya, it's Amber. Tommy's girlfriend? I got your number from his phone. He asked me to call because he thought maybe you'd answer for someone who isn't family. I almost laughed. What can I do for you, Amber? Look. I don't really understand what's going on, but Tommy is freaking out about some legal stuff and money problems. He says you left some kind of letter that doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. Tommy just doesn't like what it says. He mentioned something about you moving out. But that seems crazy. You guys are family. Yes, we are. Which is why it's so disappointing that they've been lying to me for years while planning to abandon me. Silence on the other end. Tommy told me you overheard us talking yesterday, but he says we didn't mean anything bad by it. We were just discussing the future. Amber. Do you have siblings? Yes. Have you ever spent 6 years sacrificing your education, career, and relationships to raise them? Only to discover they've been secretly planning to leave you behind while stealing money that legally belongs to you? No. Then you probably can't understand why I might want some space to reconsider our family dynamic. But Maya, they really need your help with this house situation. Tommy says you're the only one who knows how to handle the financial stuff. Tommy is 22 years old with a college degree. Isabella is 21 and starting her senior year. Zoe is 18 and about to start college. If they don't know how to handle basic adult responsibilities, this is a perfect opportunity for them to learn. But what if they can't figure it out? Then they'll face the natural consequences of their choices. Just like any other adult. I hung up and turned off my phone. Tomorrow was Sunday, and I had plans. Job orientation materials to review, furniture shopping for my apartment, and a long lunch with my friend Katie, the first social plan I'd made for myself in months. My siblings could spend the weekend learning to solve problems without me. It would be good practice for the rest of their lives. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes new beginnings feel inevitable. I stood in front of the mirror in my new apartment, straightening the blazer I'd bought for my first day as a regional manager, and felt something I'd almost forgotten: professional excitement. For 6 years, I'd been defining myself by my family role: sister, caretaker, problem solver, emotional support system. Today, I was just Maya Collins, business professional, responsible for no one's welfare but my own. The drive to my new office took me through the downtown area I'd been avoiding for years because it reminded me of the life I'd given up when our parents died. This morning, those same streets felt like possibilities rather than regrets. The bookstore chain's regional headquarters occupied 3 floors of a renovated historic building. My office was on the 2nd floor with a view of the city center and windows that actually opened to let in fresh air. Maya, welcome to the team. Amanda Walsh, the district supervisor who'd hired me, appeared with a coffee mug and a genuine smile. Ready for your first day as a regional manager? More than ready. The orientation process was everything I'd missed about professional environments. Structured meetings, clear expectations, colleagues who communicated directly instead of through passive-aggressive hints and emotional manipulation. By noon, I was reviewing quarterly sales reports and developing strategy proposals for underperforming locations. Work that engaged my brain instead of just my caretaking instincts. During my lunch break, I checked my phone for the first time since leaving for work. 17 missed calls. 23 text messages. 4 voicemails. The progression of messages told an interesting story. Sunday evening, Tommy had tried the reasonable approach: Maya, we've all had time to think about this situation. We're willing to discuss changes to our family dynamic if that's what you want. But we need you to come home so we can have a proper conversation. By Sunday night, he'd moved to bargaining: Maya, I talked to a lawyer about the house situation. He says we might be able to work out a payment plan for the expenses you used to cover. We're open to that discussion. Monday morning brought desperation: Maya, the electric company called. They want payment for the outstanding balance or they're shutting off power Wednesday. I don't understand how to handle this. Please call me back. Isabella's messages were more strategic but equally revealing: Maya, I've been researching the Social Security issue you mentioned. I think there might have been some administrative errors that we can correct without involving lawyers. Can we meet to discuss a solution? Then, Maya, I need you to explain how you accessed Dad's life insurance money without our knowledge. The bank says you had proper legal authority. But I don't understand how that's possible. And finally, Maya, Zoe is really struggling with this situation. She didn't know about the college plans or the financial issues. She shouldn't be punished for decisions Tommy and I made. Zoe's messages were the hardest to read: Maya, I don't understand why everyone's fighting about money. Isabella keeps talking about legal problems and Tommy is angry all the time. I just want you to come home. Maya, I tried to do laundry and the washing machine is making weird noises. Also, there's no food in the house and I don't know how to grocery shop for a family. Can you please help me? Maya, Northwestern called to confirm my enrollment. I told them I needed to check with my family about the financial arrangements, but I don't know who to check with anymore. Are you still my guardian? I'm confused about everything. The most recent message was from a number I didn't recognize. This is Patricia Stone from County Social Services. I received a call about a family situation involving Maya Collins and 3 younger siblings. Please call me at your earliest convenience to discuss welfare check protocols. I stared at that message for a full minute. Someone had called social services. Given that my siblings were all legal adults, there was only one reason someone would involve social services in our situation. They were trying to make me look like I'd abandoned dependent minors. I called Patricia Stone immediately. Miss Stone? This is Maya Collins. I received your message about a welfare check. Ms. Collins, thank you for calling back. I received a report that you had left your family home and that there were concerns about the welfare of younger siblings in your care. Can you help me understand the situation? I can absolutely help you understand. First, I should clarify that my siblings are all legal adults. Tommy is 22. Isabella is 21, and Zoe is 18. I see. The caller seemed to think there were minors involved. No minors. Just adults who are learning to live independently for the first time. And you recently moved out of the family home? Yes. I've been the primary caretaker for my siblings since our parents died 6 years ago. Last week, I discovered they'd been making plans to move away and live independently without informing me. I decided to support their independence goals by beginning my own independent adult life. Are there any safety or welfare concerns regarding your siblings? None whatsoever. They're all educated, healthy adults with access to financial resources. They're simply experiencing the normal adjustment period that comes with transitioning from dependent to independent living. I see. Well, this sounds like a family matter rather than a social services issue. Thank you for clarifying. After I hung up, I sat in my office chair looking out at the city skyline. My siblings had tried to weaponize social services against me. They'd attempted to frame my decision to live independently as child abandonment. It was a new low, even for them. But it was also a tactical error that revealed just how desperate they'd become in less than 48 hours without me. I opened my laptop and began typing a new document. If my siblings wanted to escalate this situation beyond family dynamics into legal territory, they were about to discover that I'd been preparing for that possibility much longer than they'd been planning their escape. Time to show them what 6 years of handling all the family's legal and financial issues had taught me about protecting myself. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected visitor to my new office. Through the glass door, I could see a young woman in the reception area who looked remarkably familiar. Zoe. I walked out to meet her, curious about how she'd tracked down my workplace and what had motivated her to come here instead of continuing to call my phone. Zoe? How did you find me here? She looked smaller than usual in the professional environment, younger than her 18 years. I followed you yesterday morning. I've been sitting in the parking lot since 7 a.m. waiting for you to arrive. You followed me? Maya, I need to understand what's happening. Everyone keeps talking around me like I'm still a child, but I'm legally an adult now and I deserve to know the truth. She was right. Of all my siblings, Zoe had been the least involved in the deception, mostly because Tommy and Isabella had protected her from the financial complexities of our family situation. Would you like to get coffee? There's a cafe across the street. 20 minutes later, we sat in a corner booth while Zoe listened to the full explanation of what had been happening in our family for the past several years. So the Social Security money that Tommy said was family money was actually supposed to be divided equally between all of us? Yes. And the college fund that Isabella said was depleted when I needed to apply for scholarships was actually still intact. But they were hiding it? Yes. And the reason you were always working multiple jobs wasn't because our parents left us with money problems, but because Tommy and Isabella were keeping the survivor benefits instead of sharing them? Yes. Zoe sat quietly for several minutes, processing information that reframed her understanding of the past 6 years. Maya, I didn't know any of this. When Isabella helped me apply for scholarships, she told me our family couldn't afford college costs. When Tommy talked about everyone needing to work to support the household, he made it sound like we were barely surviving financially. I believe you. But now I'm wondering if they lied to you about their college plans, and lied to you about the money, and lied to you about wanting me to live independently. What else did they lie about? It was exactly the question I'd hoped she would ask. Zoe. Can I show you something? I pulled out my tablet and opened the folder containing the financial documents I'd gathered over the past few months. This is a breakdown of all family expenses over the past 6 years. The green highlighted entries represent money I contributed from my own work. The blue highlighted entries represent money that came from survivor benefits. She scrolled through the spreadsheet, her eyes widening as she saw the pattern. You paid for almost everything. I paid for everything that mattered. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, car payments, insurance, medical expenses, school supplies. Graduation costs. The survivor benefits that your siblings collected were treated as their personal spending money. But you let us believe you were just contributing your fair share to family expenses. I was protecting you from financial stress while you focused on school. But I was also unknowingly enabling your siblings to deceive all of us about our real financial situation. Zoe continued scrolling. Maya, according to this, you've spent almost $200,000 on family expenses over 6 years. $187,000. To be exact. While Tommy and Isabella were saving money and planning their own futures. While they were planning futures that conveniently didn't include responsibility for anyone else. She set down the tablet and looked at me directly. I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything, Zoe. You were a child when this started. And your siblings deliberately kept you uninformed about the financial arrangements. But I do owe you an apology. Because when I found your letter Sunday morning, my first thought wasn't about whether you were okay or whether you had good reasons for leaving. My first thought was about how your decision would affect me. It was a remarkably mature observation. What's your situation now with Northwestern? That's actually why I needed to find you. The financial aid office wants to verify my family's financial status before finalizing my aid package. But I don't know what our family's financial status actually is anymore. I pulled out my phone and showed her the document I'd prepared for exactly this conversation. This is a complete financial profile for our family as of today. Your siblings' college savings accounts, the current status of the survivor benefits, the house mortgage situation, everything. You can use this information to provide accurate data to Northwestern's financial aid office. What about you? Are you still planning to be my guardian for college purposes? Zoe, you're 18. You don't need a guardian anymore. But if you need someone to co-sign loans or provide financial documentation, I'm willing to help you with that. Even after everything that's happened? You weren't part of the deception. You were being lied to just as much as I was. She started crying. Not dramatically. Just quiet tears that suggested she'd been holding in a lot of confusion and stress. Maya, I'm scared. Tommy and Isabella keep talking about legal problems and money issues. But they won't explain what any of it means. And now you're gone. And I don't know how to live in that house without you managing everything. What specifically are you scared about? I don't know how to pay bills or buy groceries. Or handle emergencies. I don't know how to wash clothes properly or cook meals or any of the basic stuff you always took care of. And I'm supposed to leave for college in 6 weeks, but Tommy says we might not have a house by then. Zoe, all of those things can be learned. And you have time to learn them. But what if I can't? What if I'm too dependent on other people taking care of me? Then you'll figure it out the same way millions of other 18-year-olds figure it out when they leave home. By making mistakes, learning from them, and gradually becoming competent. Will you help me learn? I looked at my youngest sister across the cafe table. She'd been manipulated and lied to by Tommy and Isabella, but she'd also been protected from taking any real responsibility for her own life. I'll help you learn to be independent. But I won't go back to being your caretaker. What's the difference? A caretaker solves your problems for you. A teacher shows you how to solve problems yourself. She nodded slowly. I think I'd rather have a teacher. Good. Because I'm much better at being a teacher than I ever was at being a caretaker. That evening, I met Zoe at her apartment near the university campus, an apartment I'd had no idea she'd rented for the summer between high school and college. Apparently, she'd been planning for more independence than anyone in our family had realized. When did you get this place? I asked, looking around the small but well-organized studio. 3 months ago. I got a summer job at the campus bookstore and wanted to practice living on my own before college started. She paused. I was planning to tell everyone at Sunday's graduation party. But then everything exploded. Why didn't you mention it in your calls this week? Because Tommy and Isabella kept saying I needed to come home to help deal with the family crisis. They made it sound like you'd abandoned us and left us helpless. I sat down at her small kitchen table while she made tea. Zoe. What did they tell you about why I left? Tommy said you had some kind of breakdown because you found out about our college and job plans. He said you felt unappreciated and decided to punish us by leaving. And you believed that? I didn't know what to believe. It didn't sound like the Maya I know. But I also couldn't imagine why you'd just disappear without talking to us first. What changed your mind? Reading your letters more carefully. And realizing that Tommy and Isabella kept changing their explanations for what had happened. She handed me a cup of tea. Also, I started paying attention to how they talked about you. How so? They kept referring to you as responsible Maya, and practical Maya, and Maya who handles everything. Never. Just Maya. Like you weren't a person with your own wants and needs, just a role that exists to make their lives easier. It was an astute observation. When did you start noticing that? Honestly? Yesterday, when I was trying to figure out how to do laundry and Tommy got frustrated with me for not knowing the process. He said, "Why didn't Maya teach you this stuff? Like it was your job to prepare me for independence while it was my job to remain dependent." What did you say? I asked him why he never learned to do laundry either. He's 22 and has been living in the same house as a washing machine for 6 years. I laughed despite myself. What was his response? He said that was different because he'd been focusing on his education and career preparation. When I pointed out that I'd also been focusing on education, he said girls mature faster and are naturally better at domestic tasks. Ah. Yeah. That's when I realized that maybe your decision to leave wasn't about feeling unappreciated. Maybe it was about refusing to accept a role that nobody should have to accept. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, sipping tea and looking out her window at the campus where she'd be starting her adult life in a few weeks. Maya. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you regret taking care of us for all those years? If you could go back and make a different choice after Mom and Dad died, would you? I thought about the question carefully. I don't regret taking care of you. I regret not recognizing sooner that taking care of you didn't have to mean sacrificing my own development as a person. What do you mean? I could have gone to college part-time while managing the household. I could have dated, maintained friendships, pursued hobbies. I could have been a good guardian to you and Isabella and a good sister to Tommy without disappearing into the role completely. Why didn't you? Because I thought being a good guardian meant putting myself last. I thought love meant self-sacrifice. I thought family meant one person carrying all the responsibilities so everyone else could be free to pursue their dreams. But that's not actually what family means. No. Real family means everyone contributing according to their abilities and everyone supporting each other's growth. What we had was me enabling the rest of you to avoid developing adult capabilities. Is that why you left? To force us to develop adult capabilities? I left because I realized that as long as I was willing to handle everything, you'd never need to learn how to handle anything. And I was tired of being the only adult in a family of adults. Zoe was quiet for several minutes. Maya. I want to ask you something, but I'm afraid of what the answer might be. Ask anyway. Do you think I'm capable of being independent? Really independent. Not just college independent where someone else is still managing the logistics of my life? What do you think? I think I don't know. I've never had to try. Then maybe it's time to find out. Even if I fail at first? Especially if you fail at first. Failure is how you learn what you actually need to work on. She nodded slowly. Okay. I want to try. But Maya. I need to tell you something else. What? Tommy and Isabella have been talking about hiring a lawyer. What kind of lawyer? They think you did something illegal with the life insurance money and the Social Security benefits. They want to challenge your right to make financial decisions without family consultation. I set down my teacup. Zoe. Do you understand what they're really saying? What do you mean? They're saying that even though I spent 6 years managing all family finances while they contributed nothing, they believe they're entitled to control my access to my own inheritance money. Is that legal? It's not illegal for them to hire a lawyer. But they're going to discover that I documented everything very carefully. And that all my financial decisions were completely legal and appropriate. What happens if they actually file a lawsuit? Then they'll be required to provide financial disclosure about their own assets and income sources, including the survivor benefits they collected fraudulently and the money they've been hiding in separate accounts. You think they'll go through with it? I think they're panicking because they're facing adult responsibilities for the first time in their lives. And they're looking for someone to blame for their situation. What should I do if they ask me to support their legal case? You should tell them the truth about what you know and let them make their own decisions about how to proceed. And what if they pressure me to choose sides? Then you should remember that you're not responsible for managing their emotions or protecting them from the consequences of their choices. You're only responsible for making good decisions for yourself. Zoe smiled for the first time since I'd seen her in my office that morning. I think I'm starting to understand what independence actually means. What does it mean? It means you get to decide what your life looks like instead of letting other people decide for you. Exactly. Thursday morning brought an official-looking letter to my new apartment. Law offices of Bradley, Patterson and Associates. Requesting my immediate contact regarding urgent family legal matters affecting the Collins estate. I called the number during my lunch break. Ms. Collins. Thank you for calling. This is Bradley Patterson. I represent Thomas and Isabella Collins in a matter concerning the administration of your family's estate assets. What can I help you with, Mr. Patterson? My clients believe there may have been some irregularities in the distribution of life insurance proceeds and ongoing management of survivor benefit funds. They've asked me to investigate the possibility of financial mismanagement. I almost laughed. Mr. Patterson. Are you aware that I've been the sole financial manager for our family for 6 years? With full legal authority and complete documentation of all transactions? My clients seem to think that certain recent financial decisions were made without proper family consultation. Such as the redistribution of life insurance money and the termination of your financial responsibility for shared household expenses. I see. Mr. Patterson. Do your clients understand that the life insurance money was legally mine to distribute according to the terms of our parents' will? They believe the money should have remained in the family account for shared expenses and emergency funds. For whose shared expenses? My clients are all adults living independently. Thomas has graduated college and been offered employment in California. Isabella is completing her degree and planning to transfer to UCLA. Zoe has a full scholarship to Northwestern University. What shared expenses do they anticipate needing emergency funds for? Silence on the other end of the line. Mr. Patterson. I think there may be some confusion about the nature of our family situation. Would it be helpful if I provided you with documentation of all financial transactions from the past 6 years? That might be helpful. Yes. I'll have comprehensive financial records delivered to your office by tomorrow afternoon. They include bank statements, receipts, legal documentation of all estate transactions, and proof of legal authority for all decisions I made regarding family finances. Ms. Collins. Can I ask you a direct question? Of course. Do you believe your siblings have legitimate concerns about financial irregularities? Or is this a family dispute that's being framed as a legal matter? Mr. Patterson. I believe my siblings are experiencing the normal stress that comes with transitioning from dependent to independent adult living. And they're looking for someone to blame for the challenges they're facing. I see. However, if they're genuinely concerned about financial irregularities, I'm happy to have a forensic accountant review all family financial transactions. I'm confident that such a review will show that I managed family finances responsibly and legally for 6 years. And you're comfortable with that level of financial scrutiny? Completely comfortable. Are your clients comfortable with the same level of scrutiny being applied to their personal financial activities over the same time period? Another pause. Ms. Collins. Let me be direct with you. Based on this conversation, I'm beginning to suspect that my clients may not have provided me with complete information about their family's financial situation. That would not surprise me. Would you be willing to meet with me and my clients to discuss this matter in person? It might help everyone understand the actual legal and financial realities of your situation. I'm willing to meet. But Mr. Patterson, I want to be clear about something. Yes? I'm not interested in negotiating about my right to live independently or my authority to manage my own finances. If your clients want to challenge my legal decisions, they're welcome to do so through proper legal channels. But I won't be bullied into resuming a caretaker role that was damaging to all of us. I understand. Would next Tuesday afternoon work for a meeting? Tuesday is perfect. After I hung up, I opened my laptop and began preparing the documentation that Mr. Patterson had requested. 6 years of financial records, all meticulously organized and legally documented. By the time I finished compiling everything, I had 3 inches of paperwork that told the story of how one person had single-handedly managed the financial lives of 4 adults while 3 of those adults contributed nothing, and planned their secret departures. It wasn't a story that would reflect well on my siblings' character or their claims of financial mismanagement. My phone rang. Zoe's number. Maya? I need to tell you something. Tommy and Isabella want me to sign a statement for their lawyers saying that you never consulted with the family before making financial decisions. What kind of statement? Something about how you acted independently without considering our input on major financial matters. What did you tell them? I told them that was ridiculous because none of us ever provided input on financial matters. We just assumed you would handle everything and never asked questions about how anything worked. How did they respond to that? Isabella said that was exactly the problem. You made us dependent on you and then abandoned us without warning. And you said? I said that sounded like we were admitting that we chose to remain ignorant about our own financial situation for 6 years. And that didn't seem like something we should put in a legal document. I smiled. Good thinking. Maya, I'm not signing their statement. But I need to ask you something. What? If they actually file a lawsuit against you, will that affect my college enrollment? Like, if there's a legal dispute about family finances, will Northwestern question my financial aid eligibility? No. Your financial aid is based on your status as an individual student, not on your family's legal disputes. And you're sure you're legally protected in this situation? Completely sure. Zoe. I've been documenting everything for months specifically because I suspected they might react this way to losing their free caretaker service. You knew they'd try to sue you? I knew they'd try something. People who are used to having someone else solve their problems don't typically accept responsibility gracefully when that service ends. Is that why you moved out so quietly? To avoid exactly this kind of drama? Partially. But mostly I moved out quietly because I wanted to control the timing and circumstances of my departure instead of being guilt-tripped into staying longer. Do you think they'll actually go through with the lawsuit? I think they'll discover that their lawyer is going to require a lot more information about their own financial activities than they're comfortable providing. What do you mean? I mean that people who've been committing Social Security fraud probably shouldn't invite legal scrutiny of their financial situation. Zoe was quiet for a moment. Maya. How long have you known about the Social Security thing? About 3 months. And you didn't report it? I was hoping they'd find a way to correct the situation voluntarily. I gave them multiple opportunities to be honest with me about their finances. But now that they're trying to sue you, now I'm done protecting them from the consequences of their own choices. What does that mean? It means that if they want to fight this battle in court, they're going to get more legal scrutiny than they bargained for. Tuesday's meeting was going to be very interesting. Tuesday afternoon, I arrived at Bradley Patterson and Associates dressed in my best professional attire and carrying 2 briefcases full of documentation. I felt calm, prepared, and curious to see how my siblings would react to having their financial decisions examined by a neutral third party. Tommy and Isabella were already seated in the conference room when I arrived, both looking significantly more stressed than when I'd seen them at the graduation party 2 weeks ago. Zoe had declined to attend, saying she didn't want to be part of any legal action against me. Maya, Tommy stood up when I entered. We really appreciate you being willing to discuss this situation. Of course. I'm always willing to discuss our family's finances. Bradley Patterson was a middle-aged man with the kind of careful demeanor that suggested he'd already realized this case wasn't what his clients had initially described. Ms. Collins, thank you for coming. I've reviewed the preliminary documentation you sent, and I have some questions about the overall family financial situation. I'm happy to answer any questions. Let's start with the basic timeline. You became the financial manager for your family 6 years ago when your parents died? Yes. I was 22, Tommy was 16, Isabella was 15. And Zoe was 12. And you maintained sole responsibility for all household finances from that time until 2 weeks ago? Yes. During that time, did your siblings contribute to household expenses? I opened my first briefcase and pulled out a summary document. This is a complete breakdown of financial contributions by family member over 6 years. The green columns represent my contributions, totaling $187,000. The blue columns represent contributions from my siblings, totaling $3,400. Bradley reviewed the document while Tommy and Isabella shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Ms. Collins, this shows that you contributed over 98% of all household expenses. That's correct. And during this same period, your siblings were receiving survivor benefits from Social Security? Yes. Approximately $1,200 per month each until they turned 18. Then reduced amounts while they remained in school. Do you know how those benefits were used? I pulled out another set of documents. These are bank statements showing deposits of survivor benefit payments and subsequent withdrawals. As you can see, the money was consistently withdrawn as cash or transferred to personal accounts. Bradley's expression became carefully neutral as he reviewed the statements. Mr. Collins, Ms. Collins, can you explain how you used your survivor benefit payments? Tommy and Isabella exchanged glances. We used them for personal expenses, Isabella said carefully. School supplies, clothing, things like that. According to these bank records, you each withdrew approximately $800 to $1,000 per month in cash. That's a significant amount for personal expenses for teenagers. We were saving for college, Tommy said. In cash? More uncomfortable glances. Mr. Patterson, I said quietly. There's something else you should know about the survivor benefit situation. I pulled out the investigative report I'd commissioned 3 months earlier. This is documentation showing that my siblings used my social security number to claim I was still a dependent when they applied for continued benefits after turning 18. This allowed them to collect higher benefit amounts while making me ineligible to claim my own share. Bradley read the report silently. The room became very quiet. Ms. Collins. Are you saying your siblings committed benefit fraud? I'm saying the Social Security Administration has been provided with documentation of discrepancies in benefit claims and is conducting their own investigation. Tommy's face went pale. Maya, you reported us to Social Security? I provided them with accurate information about our family's financial situation. When? Last week. After I learned that you'd been planning to abandon me while continuing to benefit financially from my caretaker status. Isabella leaned forward. Maya. That's not what we were planning. We were planning to become independent. Isabella. You were planning to become independent using money you obtained fraudulently while I continued to pay for the household expenses that enabled you to save that money. Bradley set down the investigative report. I think I need to understand the current situation more clearly. Ms. Collins. What exactly prompted your decision to change the family's financial arrangements? I pulled out my phone and played the recording I'd made at the graduation party. Tommy's voice filled the conference room. Maya's basically our live-in nanny. She's been taking care of us since Mom and Dad died. So she doesn't really have her own life to worry about. When we move to California after graduation, she'll probably just stay in the house and keep everything running until we're ready to settle down. The recording continued with Amber's comment about free housekeeping and Isabella's explanation of their plan to outvote me on selling the house. When it finished, the conference room was silent. Mr. Patterson, I said quietly, my siblings weren't planning to become independent. They were planning to abandon me after using me as free domestic labor while they saved money for their own futures. Bradley turned to Tommy and Isabella. Is this recording accurate? Neither of them answered. Ms. Collins. What outcome are you looking for in this situation? I want my siblings to take responsibility for their own adult lives. I want them to understand that their financial problems are not my responsibility to solve. And I want them to stop trying to manipulate me into resuming a caretaker role that was harmful to all of us. And you're not seeking any financial compensation for the years of support you provided? No. I consider that a gift I gave to my family. But I won't continue giving gifts to people who view my contributions as entitlements. Bradley closed his files. Mr. Collins. Ms. Collins, I need to speak with you privately. I gathered my documentation and waited in the lobby while Bradley had a private conversation with my siblings. 20 minutes later, he appeared alone. Ms. Collins. My clients have decided not to pursue legal action at this time. I see. They've also asked me to convey an apology for involving you in what they now recognize was primarily a family communication issue. I appreciate that. If I may offer some personal observation. Based on 20 years of family law practice. Please. Your siblings are very fortunate that you managed their financial affairs as responsibly as you did. Many families in similar situations experience much worse outcomes when one person carries all the financial responsibility. Thank you. And Ms. Collins? What you've done stepping back from an enabling relationship to allow your siblings to develop independence that takes real courage. Many people in your situation would have continued the pattern indefinitely. As I drove back to my apartment that evening, I felt something I hadn't expected, sadness. Not regret. But sadness for the family relationships that might have been possible if we'd all learned healthy independence earlier. But I also felt something stronger, relief. The legal threat was over. My siblings finally understood the reality of their financial situation. And I was free to build whatever relationship with them felt genuine rather than obligatory. For the first time in 6 years. Our family dynamic would be based on choice rather than dependency. It was a much better foundation for whatever came next. 3 weeks later. I was settling into my new routine when my phone rang with a call from an unknown local number. Maya? This is Officer Rodriguez with the County Sheriff's Department. I'm calling about a wellness check request for your address. My heart stopped. A wellness check? Is everything okay? Someone called concerned that you might be in danger or experiencing some kind of crisis. They said you disappeared from your family home and weren't responding to attempts to contact you. Officer Rodriguez. I moved out of my family home a month ago to start my own independent adult life. I'm not missing or in danger. I'm just living separately from my siblings. I see. The caller seemed to think you might be experiencing some kind of breakdown or mental health crisis. Who made the call? I can't release that information. But they claim to be a concerned family member. Officer, my siblings and I recently had a disagreement about family responsibilities and financial arrangements. I chose to move out and live independently. Some family members have been having difficulty accepting that decision. Are you safe and able to care for yourself? Completely safe. I have a new job, a new apartment. And I'm doing very well. Would you be willing to verify that in person? It would help us close the case. An hour later. Officer Rodriguez knocked on my apartment door. He was a professional, courteous man who took about 5 minutes to assess that I was clearly safe, healthy, and living independently by choice. Ms. Collins, I'm satisfied that this was a misunderstanding. However, I want to give you some information about harassment protections in case this pattern continues. You think this might continue? Sometimes when families have disputes about independence and financial arrangements, the concerned family members escalate their attempts to regain control. If you continue receiving unwanted welfare checks, legal threats, or other forms of pressure, you have options. After he left, I sat in my apartment thinking about what had just happened. Someone in my family, almost certainly Tommy or Isabella, had tried to use law enforcement to pressure me into returning home. It was another escalation in their campaign to avoid accepting responsibility for their own lives. My phone rang. Zoe's number. Maya, I need to tell you something. But I'm worried you're going to be upset with me. What happened? Isabella called the police for a wellness check on you. She told them you'd had a breakdown and might hurt yourself. Why are you worried I'd be upset with you? Because I didn't stop her. I was standing right there when she made the call, and I didn't try to talk her out of it. Zoe. You're not responsible for controlling Isabella's choices. But I knew it was wrong. She was lying to the police about your mental state just to create problems for you. What exactly did she tell them? She said you'd abandoned your family without explanation. Weren't responding to calls or messages, and she was worried you might be suicidal or in danger. And Tommy supported this? Tommy was the one who suggested it. He said that maybe if the police did a welfare check, you'd realize how much you were worrying everyone and come home to talk things through. I felt a familiar anger. But this time it was clean and focused rather than confused and guilty. Zoe. How do you feel about what they did? I think they're desperate and making bad decisions because they don't want to accept that you're not coming back. Are you comfortable with that kind of behavior from your siblings? No. And Maya, I need to tell you something else. What? I told them I won't participate in any more attempts to pressure you to come home. I told them that what they're doing looks like harassment. And I don't want to be part of it. How did they respond? Isabella said I was being disloyal to the family. Tommy said I was too young to understand the complexities of the situation. And you said? I said that I was an adult making my own decision about what kind of behavior I'm willing to support. Good for you. Maya. I want to ask you something, but I don't want you to feel obligated to say yes. What? Would you be willing to meet for dinner this weekend? Just you and me, not as part of any family drama or attempt to fix anything. Just because I miss talking to you. I'd like that very much. Really? Really? Zoe, you're my sister. The fact that I needed to stop being everyone's caretaker doesn't mean I stopped caring about you as a person. I was worried that leaving meant you were done with. All of us. Leaving meant I was done with being taken advantage of. I was never done with having relationships with people who treat me well. After we hung up, I thought about the difference between Zoe's response to my independence and Tommy and Isabella's response. Zoe had been confused and hurt initially. But she'd listened to explanations, considered new information, and adjusted her understanding of the situation. Tommy and Isabella were still trying to manipulate me into returning to my old role through guilt, legal threats, and now false police reports. The pattern revealed everything I needed to know about which relationships were worth preserving and which ones needed significant boundaries. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Bradley Patterson. I wanted to let you know that Tommy Collins contacted my office today asking about filing harassment charges against you for refusing to communicate with your family. I informed him that moving out of a family home and living independently is not harassment. I thought you should be aware of this contact. I stared at that message and felt something shift in my chest. My siblings weren't just resistant to my independence, they were actively trying to sabotage it through legal manipulation. It was time to implement the final phase of my disengagement strategy. I opened my laptop and began typing a formal letter to be delivered by certified mail to Tommy and Isabella at the family home. If they wanted to escalate this situation into a legal matter, they were going to discover that I'd been preparing for that possibility longer than they'd been planning their own departures. Sometimes the best defense against manipulation is complete transparency about exactly what you're prepared to do if the manipulation continues. Saturday evening. I met Zoe at a small Italian restaurant downtown. She looked more relaxed than I'd seen her in weeks. And she'd brought a folder that she set on the table between us. What's in the folder? I asked after we'd ordered. Documentation. I've been keeping track of everything that's happened since you moved out. Why? Because I realized that if Tommy and Isabella are willing to lie to lawyers and police officers about you, they might also be lying to me about other things. I wanted to have accurate information. She opened the folder and pulled out a timeline written in her neat handwriting. This is everything I witnessed or overheard since you left, including the conversations they had when they thought I wasn't listening. I reviewed her timeline. It was remarkably thorough and damaging to my siblings' credibility. Zoe, why did you compile all this? Because I love you, but I also love Tommy and Isabella. And I think the way to help people you love is to document reality instead of enabling denial. What kind of reality? The reality that they're not upset because you abandoned the family. They're upset because they're facing adult responsibilities for the first time in their lives. And it's harder than they expected. She pointed to an entry from the previous Tuesday. Look at this. Tommy spent 40 minutes on the phone trying to get the electric company to accept a partial payment plan. When they said no, he called Isabella crying because he didn't know how to handle the situation. What did Isabella suggest? That they call you and ask you to pay the bill as a loan until they could figure out their finances. And when you pointed out that asking me for money wasn't really independence, Isabella said that's what family is for, helping each other through difficult times. But they weren't offering to help me through any difficult times. Exactly. That's when I realized they don't actually understand what mutual support means. They think family means other people solve their problems while they focus on their own goals. I continued reading through her timeline. It painted a clear picture of two young adults discovering that independence required skills they'd never developed. Zoe, what's your assessment of their current situation? I think they're capable of learning to handle their responsibilities, but they don't want to go through the learning process. They want to skip directly to being successful adults without experiencing the trial and error phase. And you think that's unrealistic? I think that's exactly the kind of thinking that led them to lie about their college plans and hide money while letting you pay for everything. She pulled out another document. Maya, I need to show you something else. This is a record of every time Tommy and Isabella have asked me to contact you on their behalf. The list was extensive. Requests for me to come home and discuss the situation. Requests for me to help with specific household problems. Requests for me to provide financial assistance with utilities and groceries. What did you tell them? I told them that if they wanted to communicate with you, they should contact you directly instead of trying to use me as a messenger. How did they respond to that? They said you weren't answering their calls or responding to their messages. That's true. I haven't responded to any attempts at contact since I moved out. Why not? Because every message has been either a demand that I return home, a request for financial assistance, or an attempt to guilt me into resuming my caretaker role. None of them have acknowledged my right to live independently or expressed interest in building a different kind of relationship. Zoe nodded. That's what I figured. Maya, I want to tell you something, but I need you to promise not to get upset. I can't promise that. But I can promise to listen. I think Tommy and Isabella are never going to accept your independence voluntarily. What do you mean? I mean they're so used to having someone else solve their problems that they can't imagine a world where they're responsible for their own lives. Every time they face a challenge, their first instinct is to find a way to get you to handle it. And you think that's going to continue indefinitely? I think they'll keep escalating their attempts to pressure you into coming back until you make it clear that those attempts will have negative consequences for them. What kind of consequences? Legal consequences. Social consequences. Financial consequences. Something that makes continuing to harass you more costly than learning to handle their own problems. It was a remarkably sophisticated analysis of family dynamics from an 18-year-old. Zoe, what made you think about this situation in those terms? Honestly? Watching you. The way you handled the legal meeting, the police welfare check, all of it. You didn't get emotional or defensive. You just documented everything and responded strategically. And you think I should continue that approach? I think you should do whatever gives you the best chance of living the life you want to live. After dinner, we walked through downtown while Zoe told me about her preparations for Northwestern and her growing excitement about starting fresh in a place where nobody knew her as Maya's little sister. Are you nervous about being so far from family? I asked. I'm nervous about being responsible for myself. But I'm excited about finding out who I am when I'm not playing a role in someone else's family drama. That's exactly how I felt when I moved out. Maya, can I tell you something that might sound weird? Sure. I'm grateful that Tommy and Isabella lied to us about their plans. Why? Because if they'd been honest, you might have gradually transitioned to more independence over several months. I would have remained dependent on you for longer. And I might never have learned that I'm actually capable of handling more than I thought. You think the crisis forced everyone to grow up faster? I think the crisis forced everyone to choose between growing up and remaining children forever. What choice are you making? I'm choosing to grow up. It's scarier than remaining a child, but it's also more honest. As I drove home that evening, I thought about Zoe's observation that Tommy and Isabella might never voluntarily accept my independence. She was probably right. People who benefit from someone else's self-sacrifice rarely advocate for ending that arrangement. But as I'd learned over the past month, I didn't need their permission to live my own life. I only needed to stop giving them power to control my choices through guilt and manipulation. Monday morning, I would send the certified letters I'd prepared. It was time to make the consequences of continued harassment clear and enforceable. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for people who won't stop trying to control you is to remove their ability to do so. Monday morning, I sent 2 certified letters from the law office where I'd consulted with an attorney over the weekend. The letters were professional, clear, and legally binding. The first letter went to Tommy at the family house. This serves as formal notice that further attempts to contact Maya Collins through phone calls, text messages, emails, social media, or third parties will be considered harassment. This includes but is not limited to false reports to law enforcement, attempts to involve social services, legal threats, or requests for financial assistance. Ms. Collins has established clear boundaries regarding contact, and violations of these boundaries will result in appropriate legal action. The second letter went to Isabella at her campus address. This serves as formal notice that Maya Collins is no longer financially responsible for any expenses related to the family home or household. This includes utilities, mortgage payments, maintenance, insurance, or any other costs. Ms. Collins has also formally notified the Social Security Administration of discrepancies in benefit claims. Any further attempts to use Ms. Collins' personal information or Social Security number for financial purposes will be reported as identity theft. Both letters included documentation of all the harassment incidents, false police reports, and legal threats from the past month. By Wednesday, I knew they'd received the letters because my phone started ringing with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Tommy and Isabella calling from friends' phones when I didn't answer their own calls. I didn't answer those either. Thursday brought a visit to my office that I'd been half expecting. Maya. There's a young man in the lobby asking to see you, my assistant Amanda informed me. He says he's your brother and it's an emergency. What kind of emergency? He didn't specify. But he seems very upset. I walked to the lobby and found Tommy standing near the reception desk, looking haggard and desperate. He'd clearly not been sleeping well. Maya. We need to talk. Actually, we don't. You received a letter explaining that I'm not interested in further contact. This is an emergency. What's the emergency? They're foreclosing on the house. I looked at him calmly. When? Next month. The mortgage company says we're 3 months behind on payments. Tommy, you and Isabella have been adults for years. The house is in your names as much as mine. If you can't afford the mortgage payments, you should consider selling the house. Maya, we can't just sell the house. It's the family home. It's a house that none of you can afford to maintain. Keeping it doesn't make financial sense. But where will we live? You'll live wherever adults live when they can't afford to buy houses. Apartments, rental houses. Shared housing with roommates. The same places millions of other young adults live. Maya, please. I know we made mistakes. But we can't lose everything. You're not losing everything. You're losing a house you can't afford. That's actually a normal part of becoming financially independent. Tommy's voice started rising. Maya, this is our childhood home. This is where Mom and Dad lived. It has sentimental value beyond just money. Several people in the office lobby were starting to notice our conversation. Tommy, you're causing a scene at my workplace. I need you to leave. Not until you agree to help us figure this out. I'm not going to help you figure this out. You're adults. Figure it out yourselves. Maya, what happened to you? You used to care about family. I still care about family. That's why I stopped enabling behavior that was bad for all of us. This isn't about enabling. This is about helping your siblings during a crisis. This is about you facing the consequences of financial decisions you made as an adult. The crisis is that you're discovering adult responsibilities are more challenging than you expected. Maya, please. I'm begging you. I looked at my brother standing in my office lobby, and I felt something I hadn't expected, pity. Not enough to change my mind. But enough to soften my tone. Tommy, I understand that this situation is stressful and scary. But the skills you need to handle it are skills you should have been developing for years. I can't give you 6 years of financial education in one conversation. But you could help us transition gradually instead of just abandoning us. I gave you 6 years of gradual transition. You used that time to plan your departure while hiding your plans from me. Now you want more transition time? We made mistakes. Yes, you did. And this is what learning from mistakes looks like. I walked back toward my office. Tommy, you need to leave now, or I'll have to call security. Maya. What if we lose everything? I turned back to look at him. Then you'll learn that losing everything isn't actually the end of the world. It's just the beginning of building something new. After he left, I sat in my office thinking about the conversation. For the first time, Tommy had admitted they'd made mistakes. But he still wanted me to solve the problems those mistakes had created. It was progress, but not enough progress to change the fundamental dynamic. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. Tommy called me crying after he left your office. I told him he needed to focus on solving problems instead of finding people to blame for them. I think I'm getting better at this independence thing. I smiled and typed back, you definitely are. That evening, I got a call from my attorney. Maya. This is Janet Wilson. I wanted to let you know that I received a call today from someone claiming to represent your family regarding the letters we sent this week. What kind of call? They wanted to know if you'd be willing to enter mediation to resolve your family dispute. What did you tell them? I told them that there's no dispute to mediate. You've made a legal decision to live independently. And your family members need to accept that decision. Did they mention anything specific about wanting mediation? They seem to think that if they can get you in a room with a neutral third party, they can convince you to resume financial responsibility for family expenses. And you told them? I told them that independent adults aren't required to financially support other independent adults. And that mediation is for disputes about rights and responsibilities, not for convincing people to accept responsibilities they've legally declined. After we hung up, I realized my siblings were still operating from the fundamental assumption that our family's problems were my responsibility to solve. They weren't asking me to help them learn financial independence. They were asking me to resume managing their financial dependence. It was exactly the kind of thinking that had led to this situation in the first place. Tomorrow, I would find out if losing the house would finally convince them that they needed to develop their own problem-solving skills. 2 weeks later, Zoe called me with an update on the house situation that I found both predictable and oddly encouraging. Maya. I need to tell you what happened with the foreclosure. What happened? Tommy and Isabella spent 10 days panicking about losing the house. Then they spent 3 days blaming each other for the financial problems. Then they spent 2 days calling everyone they could think of to ask for money to prevent the foreclosure. And when none of that worked, they called a realtor and put the house on the market. How do they feel about that decision? Relieved. Actually, once they stopped fighting reality and started dealing with it, they realized that selling the house solves a lot of their problems. Such as, they'll split the equity 4 ways, which gives each of us enough money to pay off debts and establish independent living situations. Tommy can afford to move to California, Isabella can afford to transfer to UCLA. And I have a nest egg for college expenses. And you? How do you feel about the house being sold? Honestly, I feel like we should have done this 2 years ago. The house was always too big and too expensive for our actual needs. We were keeping it for sentimental reasons while it drained our finances. I was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Zoe. How did Tommy and Isabella come to this realization? When they finally accepted that you weren't going to bail them out, they had to start researching their own options. They discovered that selling the house was actually the most logical solution to their financial problems. Do they seem angry about having to make this decision? They're angry that it took them so long to figure it out. Isabella keeps saying she wishes she'd understood 2 years ago that keeping the house was financially irresponsible. And Tommy? Tommy's angry that he spent weeks trying to manipulate you into solving a problem that had an obvious solution he could have implemented himself. That sounds like progress. Maya. I think they're finally understanding that independence means making your own decisions instead of trying to get other people to make decisions for you. How are they handling the logistics of selling? Isabella's managing the realtor relationship and Tommy's handling the financial paperwork. They're actually working together instead of just assuming someone else will handle everything. And they're not asking you to manage any part of the process? They asked if I wanted input on the sale price and timeline. But they didn't ask me to handle any of the actual work. It's like they finally realized that being family doesn't mean one person does everything while everyone else benefits. That evening, I got an unexpected text from Isabella. Maya, I owe you an apology. Not for wanting independence, but for taking so long to accept your right to independence. The house situation taught me that I'm much more capable than I thought I was. Thank you for not rescuing us from having to learn that. I stared at that message for several minutes. It was the first communication from either Tommy or Isabella that acknowledged my perspective rather than trying to change it. I texted back, thank you for saying that. I'm proud of you for figuring out a solution that works for everyone. Her response came quickly, would you be willing to have coffee sometime? Not to discuss family business, but just to talk. I miss having you in my life. I'd like that. I promise no guilt trips or attempts to change your mind about anything. I believe you. The following Saturday, I met Isabella at a coffee shop near her campus. She looked older than when I'd last seen her, not just physically, but more mature in the way she carried herself. How are you feeling about the UCLA transfer? I asked. Excited and terrified. It's the first major decision I've made entirely on my own, based entirely on what I want rather than what seems expected or practical. That sounds healthy. Maya. I want to tell you something. But I'm not sure how to say it without sounding like I'm making excuses. Just say it directly. I think I never learned to see you as a separate person, with your own needs and goals. You were always just Maya who takes care of everything in my mind. When did that change? When you stopped taking care of everything and I had to figure out how to take care of myself. For the first time in years, I had to think about what I actually wanted and what I was capable of achieving. What did you discover? That I'm much more capable than I thought. But also that independence is more work than I expected. And that having someone else manage your life isn't actually a favor, it's a limitation. How so? Because when you were handling all the financial and logistical stuff, I never had to develop confidence in my own decision-making. I never had to learn from my mistakes because you prevented me from making mistakes. Do you think that was harmful? I think it was harmful for both of us. You never got to pursue your own goals because you were too busy managing ours. And we never got to develop competence because you were too competent. It was one of the most insightful observations about family dysfunction I'd ever heard from anyone. Let alone from my sister. Isabella. What would you do differently if you could go back 6 years? I would insist that we all contribute equally to household responsibilities from the beginning. I would ask more questions about finances instead of just trusting that you would handle everything. And I would encourage you to pursue your own education and career goals instead of assuming your goals should always come last. Those are significant changes. Maya. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think we can have a healthy relationship now? After everything that's happened? I think we can have a different relationship. Whether it's healthy will depend on whether we can interact as equals instead of in the old caretaker dynamic. What would equality look like? It would look like both of us taking responsibility for our own lives and choices. Both of us contributing to conversations and decisions when we interact. Both of us respecting the other person's right to make decisions we might not like. I want that. So do I, Maya. There's one more thing I need to tell you. What? I'm proud of you for leaving. Not because it was easy for you, but because it was the right thing to do even though it was hard. It took courage to stop enabling us and start prioritizing your own well-being. As I drove home from coffee with Isabella, I felt something unexpected, hope for our future relationship. Not because she was apologizing or promising to change, but because she was demonstrating actual change through her actions and insights. For the first time since I'd moved out, I could imagine having siblings who were partners in adult life rather than dependents in an endless caretaking arrangement. It was a much better foundation for family relationships than I'd ever thought possible. 3 months after I'd moved out, I received an invitation that surprised me. Tommy was getting married to Amber, and he wanted me to be at the wedding. The invitation came with a handwritten note, "Maya, I know our relationship has been complicated lately, but you're my sister and I want you at my wedding. No expectations, no family obligations. Just celebrating something happy together." I called Zoe to get her perspective on the invitation. "Are you going?" she asked. "I'm not sure. What's your sense of Tommy's motivations for inviting me?" "I think he genuinely wants you there. But Maya, I also think you should know that he and Amber have been living together for 2 months now." "How's that going?" "Really well, actually. Amber's been teaching him how to manage a household. And he's been learning that domestic responsibilities aren't as complicated as he thought they were." "What do you mean?" "Like, he always acted like grocery shopping and meal planning were impossibly complex tasks that required special skills. But it turns out that if you actually try to learn how to do something instead of assuming someone else will do it, most things aren't that hard." "Is he handling it well?" "He's handling it like a normal adult. He makes mistakes sometimes, but he fixes them himself instead of calling other people to fix them for him." That sounded like significant progress. "Zoe, what's your honest assessment of whether attending the wedding would be good for me?" "I think it depends on what you want to get out of it. If you want to test whether you can interact with Tommy in a social setting without falling back into old family patterns, the wedding might be a good experiment. And if I decide I'm not ready for that test, then you politely decline the invitation and send a nice gift." Tommy's learned enough about boundaries to understand that not everyone is available for every event. I thought about it for several days. Finally, I decided to call Tommy directly. "Tommy, I got your wedding invitation. Thank you for including me. Maya, I really hope you'll come. I know things have been strange between us, but I want you to be part of this celebration. I'm willing to attend. But I need to be clear about something." "What?" "I'm coming as a wedding guest, not as a family member who's responsible for helping with logistics or managing family dynamics. If there are any expectations beyond normal wedding guest behavior, I need to know now." "No expectations. Amber and I are handling all the planning ourselves. We just want you there because we love you and you're important to us." "Tommy, can I ask you something?" "Sure. How has it been, living independently with Amber?" "Honestly, it's been great. Harder than I expected in some ways, but also more satisfying than I expected." "How so?" "I like knowing that our life together is something we built ourselves instead of something someone else built for us. When we solve problems or achieve goals, it feels like we actually accomplished something. That's a very mature perspective." "Maya, I owe you an apology." "For what specifically?" "For assuming that your caretaking was something you enjoyed instead of something you were doing out of obligation. For never considering that you might want to pursue your own goals. For trying to manipulate you into coming back instead of accepting your right to live your own life." "Thank you for saying that. I mean it. And Maya, I want you to know that I've been telling people about the business you're building with family financial counseling. I'm proud of you for turning our family's mistakes into something that helps other people." "Thank you. So you'll come to the wedding?" "Yes. I'll be there." The wedding was small and elegant, held in a garden behind a historic mansion. Watching Tommy and Amber exchange vows, I was struck by how mature and confident Tommy seemed compared to 6 months ago. During the reception, I had conversations with several family friends who mentioned how proud they were of how well the Collins children had turned out. "It's remarkable," one family friend told me, "how all of you have built such independent, successful lives after losing your parents so young." I didn't correct her assumption that our independence had been a natural progression rather than a recent crisis-driven development. Later in the evening, Tommy found me on the garden terrace. "Maya, I'm glad you came." "I'm glad I came too. You and Amber seem very happy." "We are. And Maya, I want to tell you something." "What?" "Planning this wedding taught me something about family dynamics that I never understood before." "What's that?" "Amber and I had to make decisions together, compromise on different preferences, and figure out how to handle logistics as a team. For the first time, I experienced what healthy family relationships actually feel like." "How is it different?" "Nobody expects anyone else to sacrifice their own goals for the relationship. Everyone contributes according to their abilities. Decisions are made together instead of one person deciding and everyone else going along with it. That sounds like a much more sustainable way to structure family relationships." "Maya, I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that what you were doing for our family wasn't healthy family dynamics. It was one person carrying all the responsibility while everyone else benefited." "Tommy, I accept your apology. And I'm proud of you for learning to build healthier relationships. Do you think we can have a healthier relationship now?" "I think we can try. But it will have to be different from what we had before." "Different how?" "Different in that we're both independent adults who choose to include each other in our lives. Because we enjoy each other's company. Not because either of us needs the other person to manage our responsibilities." "I'd like that." As I drove home from the wedding, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, uncomplicated happiness about a family event. Not happiness mixed with resentment or obligation. Just genuine pleasure at celebrating something positive with people I cared about. It was the kind of family relationship I'd always wanted but never thought was possible. For the first time since our parents died, I could imagine a future where being part of my family enhanced my life rather than consuming it. 6 months later, I was sitting in my office reviewing applications for our family financial counseling program when my assistant knocked on my door. "Maya, there's a woman here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says she's driving through town and wanted to thank you personally for something." I walked to the reception area and found a woman about my age with 2 teenagers who looked remarkably familiar. "Ms. Collins? I'm Jennifer Martinez. We attended one of your workshops 6 months ago, the one about family financial communication." "Of course. How are things going?" "That's what I wanted to tell you. That workshop probably saved our family." She gestured to the teenagers. "These are my kids, Alex and Sam. 6 months ago, my husband and I were arguing constantly about money, the kids were stressed about college costs. And everyone was hiding financial information from each other because we didn't want to worry anyone else. What changed? We implemented the family financial transparency plan you outlined in the workshop. We started having monthly family meetings where we review expenses, discuss upcoming costs, and make decisions together about major purchases." "How did the kids respond to that?" "They were relieved," Alex said. "Before the meetings, I was constantly worried about whether we could afford college. But nobody would give me straight answers about our financial situation. Now I know exactly what we can afford and what I need to contribute through scholarships and part-time work," Sam added. "It's less stressful than wondering if every expense is going to cause a family crisis." Jennifer smiled. "Ms. Collins, your workshop taught us that hiding financial stress from family members doesn't protect them, it just makes everyone feel isolated and anxious. Are you still having the monthly meetings?" "Every month. And they've become something we actually look forward to. The kids contribute ideas about saving money, We all discuss our goals. And nobody feels responsible for managing everything alone. After they left, I sat at my desk thinking about how different their family's approach was from the one I'd grown up with. Instead of one person carrying all the financial responsibility while others remained uninformed, they'd chosen to share both the responsibility and the decision-making. My phone rang. Zoe's number. Maya, I have news. I got into the accelerated master's program at Northwestern. That's wonderful. How do you feel about it? Excited and grateful. But Maya, I want to tell you something about how this opportunity came about. What? Part of the application required an essay about overcoming challenges and demonstrating independence. I wrote about our family's transition from dependence to independence over the past year. How did you frame that experience? I wrote about how learning to take care of myself taught me that I'm much more capable than I thought I was. And how watching you prioritize your own growth gave me permission to prioritize mine. That sounds like a mature perspective on a difficult situation. Maya. The admissions committee said my essay was one of the most compelling they'd read because it showed real personal growth and insight into family dynamics. I'm proud of you for turning a difficult experience into personal development. I'm proud of you for creating the crisis that forced all of us to grow up. I didn't create the crisis. Zoe. I just stopped preventing the natural consequences of everyone else's choices. Same result though. Maya, can I tell you something? Always. I'm grateful that you left. Not because it was easy, but because it forced me to discover that I can handle much more responsibility than I ever thought possible. How do you feel about that discovery? It feels like I finally know who I actually am instead of just knowing who I am in relation to other people. After we hung up, I reviewed the reports from our family financial counseling program. In the 6 months since we'd launched, we'd worked with over 200 families dealing with various levels of financial stress and family dysfunction. The families that made the most progress were the ones that chose to redistribute responsibility rather than just shifting it from one person to another. The families that struggled the most were the ones where family members insisted on maintaining dependency relationships rather than developing competence. My phone buzzed with a text from Isabella. Maya, I wanted you to know that I graduate from UCLA next month. Top of my class. Thank you for teaching me that I'm capable of much more than I thought possible. Then a text from Tommy. Amber and I bought our first house today. We handled all the financing and negotiations ourselves. It feels amazing to know we achieved something through our own efforts. Thank you for not rescuing us from having to learn how to rescue ourselves. I looked around my office, the office that existed because I'd learned to stop taking care of other people and start building my own life. Through the window, I could see the city where I'd built a career helping families learn the same lesson. My family's dysfunction had become my life's purpose. Not because I was stuck in the past, but because I'd learned to transform past pain into present meaning. 6 months ago, I'd been a woman whose siblings used her as free childcare while planning secret departures. Today, I was a woman whose siblings had learned to build their own independent lives while maintaining genuine connections with each other. It wasn't the family relationship I'd originally planned for, but it was much better than the family relationship I'd actually had. Sometimes the best revenge against people who take advantage of your love is teaching them how to love you better. And sometimes the best outcome of a family crisis is discovering that everyone is more capable than anyone thought possible. My phone rang with a call from a potential client, a woman whose adult children had been taking advantage of her financial support while making no effort to become independent. Can you help me figure out how to stop enabling my children without destroying our relationship? She asked. Absolutely, I said. But I should warn you, the process of teaching people to be independent is often harder on you than it is on them. Why? Because you have to stop doing things you're good at so they can learn to do things they're currently bad at. You have to watch them struggle and make mistakes instead of intervening to prevent problems. That sounds terrifying. It is terrifying. But it's also the most loving thing you can do for people who are capable of more than they're currently achieving. How do you know this approach works? Because I used it with my own family. And now, instead of having siblings who need me to manage their lives, I have siblings who choose to include me in their lives because they enjoy my company. That's what I want. Then let's talk about how to get you there. As I prepared for another consultation about family boundaries and financial enabling, I realized something that would have surprised me a year ago. I was grateful for every difficult moment of the past year. Not because I'd enjoyed the conflict, but because it had taught me the difference between loving people and enabling them. The difference between being needed and being valued. The difference between family obligation and family choice. My siblings had wanted to use me as free childcare while planning lives that didn't include me. Instead, they'd accidentally taught me how to build a life that was authentically mine. Sometimes the best outcome of betrayal is discovering that you're much stronger than anyone ever expected you to be, including yourself.